Today we have Antoinetta Freeman, who is an Edward Jones advisor. She covers several states, and I'll let her say which states that she does cover. But she is in Northwest Indiana and Michigan. And so I got a chance to work with her in a number of different capacities and around financial management. The other person who will be speaking will be Jackie Crawley Harrison. She is from my hometown, and she's also a board member for the Carter Education and Community Foundation. She will be bringing the perspective of the educator. She is a business educator in the high school. She's also taught in the middle school environment as well. So we wanted to bring her perspective because she's working directly with youth around money management, having those conversations, and could give us some thoughts about how we can engage students and our own young people. Cindy and Elena, Cindy Carter Hicks and Elena Clements are board members who will be sharing the role of moderating and asking questions of our speakers today. So I think Cindy, you might have put something in the chat. Was it a question?
I did. I just shared that if anyone has questions during the presentation, go ahead and list them in the chat. We will try to answer them. And if we don't answer them during the presentation today, we'll follow up and answer them individually.
Absolutely. So this call, I would just say, is not meant to be super formal. We want to make sure that people, you may be a mom, dad, you may be a grandma, an aunt, uncle, you could be just a friend. And the conversation around money is not something that everybody is comfortable having, those talks with family members or friends. And so this call really is just about getting that conversation started. Because we're a scholarship foundation, we want parents and families to be empowered and prepared. So we wanted to have the conversation around 529s, their college saving plans. There are a number of ways to be set up for the future, and Antoinetta will probably share just a little bit about that. But we really wanted to start wrapping our arms around youth and making sure that they have every advantage possible that we can give them. And so that means we sometimes have to stop and go back to school and do a little bit of learning ourselves. So that's kind of the reason why we just wanted to have this call. And I will just kind of jump right in and ask the question to, really, I'll say both to Jackie and Antoinetta. And Jackie, if maybe you could go first, but how early should parents start having the conversation about money?
I would think as early as a child can actually comprehend purchasing gifts, items, and also too, when they're learning possibly as early as first and second grade, learning about money and coins and currency. That's kind of, maybe between 7 and 8, having those little bit of conversations about purchasing something, showing them what money entails. And, maybe if they want to purchase a small gift, showing them the process of how, maybe paying them for maybe cleaning their room, and then actually taking them to the store and showing them that concept. So I think, as early as 6 to maybe 8 would be some of those little small conversations, small steps.
Antoinette, do you have some thoughts to add?
Yes, I agree with Ms. Jackie. As early as possible, just talking and having those conversations with them. And when they can get to those grades in first and second grade where they start to understand the concept of money, I think it is really essential to do that. I remember during that time when my kids were that age, we had a game where we played, I gave them dollars, but it was broken into quarters. And I would say, how many quarters does it take to make $1? What is this? And I would have them buy things like their snacks. They work to earn snacks. I know it sounds crazy, but I would have them clean their room and they would get 50 cents or whatever. And they would ask, Mom, can I have this? And I would say, that costs you 50 cents or that costs you 25 cents. How many quarters is that? Or how many nickels is that? How many dimes is that? Just to get them to understand the concept of having money in coins, and it helps with their counting and different things in school. So it's just finding good ways to start having those conversations that's not necessarily intimidating, but just getting them to understand that money is a tool.
So I was speaking with a parent who had a little bit of pushback from maybe an emotional and a therapeutic point of view that it's hard, or maybe having this conversation with youth too soon can do some maybe damage to young kids because they take on some stress. So I don't know if it's necessarily rude, like bad manners to have that conversation, but do you guys ever run into individuals who, parents, especially Jackie, who say maybe you shouldn't have that conversation with them because it maybe will create a little stress for them?
Well, stress for a younger person, that can come in a whole different aspect of things. So I feel like it shouldn't be rude to have a conversation with your child about money. I know that thinking back, I don't think my parents ever really discussed money with us. It could be something generational that they're doing. But I mean, times have changed a little bit, and waiting too long to discuss money with students probably puts a little bit more, or your children puts a little bit more stress on them later in life, because if they've been given things all along, and then when you start to put those restraints when they get older, that's when I feel like there becomes a real issue with money if it was never discussed with them. So I don't think it's rude to talk to your kids about money. It's much needed.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely agree with that, because in what I say and what I find a lot is your first relationships that you have with money typically determines how your personality around money. And I say that a lot when I sit down and I talk to a lot of clients, or just even people that I talk to in general. And I always say, go back and think about your relationship with money and how you view money, because how you view money is the stresses of how your kids take it on. And to give you an example, my mother, she told us when we were growing up, she would always say, I can't afford that, you can't afford that, you can't afford that. And when I was in middle school, I was out with friends and I took a tube of lipstick because I couldn't afford it. But that was the perception that my mother was giving, we can't afford this, and I stole that tube of lipstick. And I remember I got caught and everything, and my mother was like, I could have bought you the lipstick. I said, but you have always told me, you can't afford that, we don't have that money. And so that was my perception of it. We didn't have anything, and I didn't want to ask or burden her with that thing. So to me, it was like, I wanted it, I'll take it, it's mine. I know that's probably not the best example, but that's just how sometimes I tell people that we have to think, and those are the behaviors that we got. And I had to get out of that with my own children, saying, oh, money don't grow on trees, you know how much that costs, or that. And I had to start having conversations with them on, okay, what does that look like? What does that mean? How do we do this? How do we pay that? And that's the kind of role that I take in doing that and explaining that to kids and in the adults.
I would agree. That's a really good example.
Definitely. So my question is, why are parents reluctant to talk to their children about money?
Okay, I'll speak on that. I feel like sometimes too that we don't want to worry our children about certain aspects of money. Also too, maybe keeping up with the Joneses, keeping up with everybody in the neighborhood. You want your kids to maybe think, okay, well, we're like everybody else, and you're really not like everybody else. So I think too, and when I talked before, generational, you think back about, growing up and what you were not able to afford, or just some of those things are just carried on. And I think we need to break away from that and kind of just have good conversations about money, starting with the basics and just letting your kids know kind of real life experiences. I feel like that's something that we have kind of shied away from. And so just, as early as possible, just getting some real conversations with your kids, because we think about all the things that our kids are doing now, playing all the different sports, AAU, being able to go out with friends, having some of those conversations about, if I'm giving $20 to my kids every weekend to go somewhere, or $40, $50 here, that begins to add up. And students don't really realize that until they actually get their first job, or, you put restraints on them and they're like, okay, all my life I've had everything I ever wanted, and now you're putting restraints on what I want. Yeah.
Right. And I'll just say that Miss Helena, who I know is also a person who works in the financial world, she mentions that parents don't always feel adequate and qualified to have that conversation, which is kind of the reason for why we're just even starting this type of conversation on a monthly basis, just getting people comfortable to ask the questions, and knowing that there's a safe space. There are people who aren't necessarily, I mean, Antoinetta, you're the expert in the field. Jackie, you're the expert for working with kids in the field, but sometimes you're not adequate and you don't feel like you can start that conversation. So we want to kind of model that and get people to a safe space where they can just ask the questions that they need to. Yeah. Antoinetta, do you have anything you wanted to ask?
Well, what I would, with that, and I know a lot of people don't have conversations because going back to that, they don't feel adequate. The best thing that I can say is this time you will know, I'm too honest and genuine to a fault sometimes. And so I have what we started doing in my house, and it was funny, as we get a budget, and I just kind of have this budget, and I tell my kids, okay, this is our budget, this is what we have to spend towards groceries, this is what we're going to spend on entertainment, this is what we're going to spend on this. And I give them a job to find something that they want to do for entertainment, if it's that movie or whatever. And you'd be surprised at when you say, okay, if we do skating or we do this, that's going to take up this much of the budget, how much kids can find that they can do for free and what they can do to assist. Because my daughter, and then you'll see them actually contemplating that, oh, we got this much to spend, or we got this. And they start understanding that concept of making choices and sacrifices that will help them later to down the line. And it's not really just being inadequate. It's just sharing what you know and saying, hey, we can learn this together. Let's learn this. Let's go here. Let's understand what this is, what checking account. Because I think the biggest concept that people have is the misconception of money. And they always think it's evil or it's bad or there's different things and those concepts. And it's like their parents didn't have conversations with them. So they don't know how to have the conversations with their children, and we just keep repeating the cycle. And it's just like, hey, we got to just sit down and be honest and say, hey, this is, I don't know exactly, but let's learn this and walk through this together.
That was a great assessment. I know that we just started back to school this week, and I do something right away with my students where I give them questions about like a parent interview to go home that first week. And one of those questions is, do you do a budget? And I'm just surprised at some of the answers to the questions. A lot of the parents say no for a budget. And I think a lot of times budget is a bad word, or it's like, oh no, budget, I can't do that. There's no way that I'm going to be able to stick to a budget. So I say that, like, beginning with those small little things about a budget, letting them know what a budget is. It can be scary, but baby steps for everything that you need to try to do with your kids about money. Baby steps. You're not going to know everything what to do. You're going to make some mistakes. Most of the time, a budget takes 3 to 4 times to be able to get it right. So I think having a budget is something that every family needs to have, even if you only do it for a short term.
So kind of to follow up on that, you know, as parents, we don't want to be, we want our kids to not feel stressed about money. We want our kids to be confident in our abilities as a parent. We don't always want to show the messy sides of ourselves. And speaking to that, you know, not feeling adequate, if parents' finances are a mess, how can they start that conversation with their children, especially, I would say, older children who, you know, maybe could participate or really learn from the parents' mistakes or the messiness of their finances? How can they open that conversation?
What I tell people to do is I tell them to have a notebook and to track. I just tell parents, anybody, I say, even my teenage, I just did this with my teenage son, he's 15, and he's getting ready to take driver's training. And I was like, okay, you want to do this and you want this car? I want you to track all your stuff that you spend. And he was looking at me like, what do you mean? I was like, even if you go to the gas station and you buy that dollar, whatever, write it all down, because I need you to see what you're spending. And a lot of people will say, how do I create a budget? Well, that right there will tell you a lot of where your money is going. If you just track it for a week, track it for 2 weeks, track it for a month, everything that you spend, and you can get a real gist of where your money is going. And from there, that's like, okay, start there. Where can we cut if we need to cut some things? Or, okay, I'm spending a little more. Like me, I tend to love Starbucks a little too much. And I had to say, okay, to cut back on to get, your Starbucks, maybe I may go, instead of going 2 times, 3 times a week, I may go twice a month. Just cutting that back and giving yourselves those small goals and budgets, because then it just becomes down to prioritizing what's important to me. I want to have my goals, and we have to get down to what helps you is, what are you saving for? What are you experiencing for? What are you trying to accomplish? And how do we get there? And it may take some sacrifices of saying, okay, I don't want to be drinking up my child's education money, so I got to cut back.
Right.
That's just being realistic about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Just start small with a small budget. Tracking, like she said, tracking. And there's an app out here for everything. There's a really nice app. The Mint app is really good. Also, too, if your kids are, having a savings account, there's so many online apps for those different banks where they can actually look at some of those things if they have a checking account. Nobody balances checkbooks anymore. So having an app, looking at that app, and believe me, if they're on their phones every day, they can be on that app looking at their transactions, looking and seeing how much they're spending on entertainment and movies and going to Sonic or Starbucks. I know I get in the habit of doing Starbucks on a regular basis. I started just actually all my gift cards, putting them on the app. But then after the gift cards were on, I was like, oh, I could just put my debit card on here and order and pick up. And believe me, over time, you can see that you're spending easily $100 a month at Starbucks, like I do. So.
Ooh, me too. I'm guilty of that.
I'm there with you.
Yeah.
I wanted to add to that too. So I bank at Chase, and just recently Chase has this, I forgot what it's called, new first-time bankers or something, that actually attaches to my account. They have their own separate account number, but I can go into my account and monitor what they spend, and it gives them different things. So it's my way of giving them their money, and then they can go in on their own and look at how they're spending their money. And then I can cut it off if I want to, but
yeah.
So it's just, just to get them to understand, hey, this is all the money that you got for the week. You need to figure out how this is going to last you through the week, because I have 2 high schoolers now who are staying after school for different things. So just to make sure that they have money in case of something, but that's not money for you just to go to the candy store and spend $10 on candy every day. So that's helped them a lot too.
I will just chime in and say the Mint app is fantastic.
Yeah.
It absolutely changed the relationship that I and my husband have with money, because we could see it. It goes into buckets and you could see where it goes. And I'm very driven by that. So when I started to see that one bucket was higher than it needed to be, I was the first one to ring the bell and say, whoa, we can't go out to dinner. And then also the Chase, being able to see my kids' finances and their bank accounts right there with my own is also incredibly empowering as a parent.
Yes. I was just going to ask Jackie, what questions do you get from kids around budgeting? Since you're teaching that and talking to them. So are there any questions that they come up that you're, kind of surprised to hear them ask?
Well, I guess a lot of times they don't really realize how much stuff costs because it's not their money. So a lot of times when the students get their first job, we talk about how to fill out a W-4 you know, we kind of look a little bit sometimes at like a zero-based budget because they don't really have a lot of other expenses, but they really don't understand just how much things cost. Like some of the kids, when they get their first job, the parents make them pay a portion of their car insurance. And, you know, we talk about the boys, you know, sometimes their premium is a little higher than girls. And the guys, they get so upset about that. They're like, we can't believe how much my insurance was, and I'm paying 50% of that. So I think a lot of times they don't understand like money, finances, the minimum wage. You know, some of them said they wouldn't work for $7.25. And I'm like, you have no experience, why not? And they're like, well, I want to make $9, $10 an hour because it's not worth it. But, you know, some money is better than no money, right? So, you know, a lot of times they just don't understand the cost of certain things. And once they actually see that cost, then they start saying, okay, well, I can't buy something from the vending machine, because most vending machines at our school are $1. And then they're paying for lunch, and then they're paying for something to drink. You think about that, or stopping at Sonic every morning. I had a young lady 1 year who did that. And I said, well, you know, how much are you spending at Sonic in the morning? And she's like $5 or $6. So I said, for 2 weeks, don't go. I mean, she was like, oh my God, I can't realize how much money I saved or not going to Chick-fil-A after school. So when they start having those conversations about what I'm spending and seeing that, that is kind of one of the things that they realize that I need to maybe step back and think about what I'm actually spending. So, you know, really knowing how much something costs, that's kind of one of the main things in their budget.
Thanks for that. Because yeah, I think we all have lost sight a little bit of how much things cost, because I think you were talking about putting your debit card and your, you know, the gift card on there, then you don't really see the price. It's you know, automatically deducted, so you don't pay attention to it until you use such things like the Mint app, or yeah, Chase. My kids, I use Chase for my kids, and so I still get to see what they're spending their money on. And that's always a great conversation. I think if we're talking about trying to get kids to be responsible, you need to continue that parent responsibility and have the actual conversation when you see that the amount of money going out is, you know, way too much, or going to things that you're like, how does that help with their goal of buying or, you know, needing X, Y, and Z. So I'm gonna go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I just kind of looking at the comments, and I like what they're saying, how they lay out the cash, because I think that's the kind of thing that sometimes I've had to force myself to do that, to where because I was not a cash carrying girl. And now I think I had to force myself when I'm laying out that budget and saying, hey, this is what I'm spending for whatever, to carrying that cash, because it's a little hard to part with the cash. And, you know, to say, if I break this $100 bill, you know, once we break $100, it's gone. Or if we break this 20, it just evaporates. And I was like, I have to do that. Because I remember my daughter told me one time, well, I said, oh, I don't have any money. She was like, well, can't you just go to the box and get the money out the machine? And I was like, okay, wait, we got to have a whole conversation on what that looked like. But it was eye-opening to me. And I was like, no, we got to start carrying cash so I can show you. Because when she had her little $20 and she broke it and had to spend it, and then she was like, oh, no, I won't do that no more. But that's the thing. We got to get back to kind of understanding what that physical touch is with that. So I like that idea of budgeting out. And sometimes I've even used the cash envelope system, where I have my envelope saying this goes, especially going to the grocery store. This is what we go spend at the grocery store. This is my money once that's gone.
Oh yeah, I love the envelope system. Yeah, I always realized that my entertainment fund went very quickly. And then I was like, you know what, I'm not going to use that much gas this month. Maybe take a little $10 out of that envelope for this. And yeah, so that envelope system, it could work, I think, for younger and older kids, that cash system. So I like that idea in the chat with the envelopes and laying the cash out on the dining room table. That's great.
When I used to work with families for DCFS or the system, the child welfare system, we would have these same conversations as a family when we were talking about how we're gonna kind of come back together and what needs to be done. And the envelope system, I would have the kids participate in that conversation with parents. And what do we want to do? You mentioned the entertainment envelope. What are some of the things that we could do for entertainment? How much is that going to cost? And so they would write, they would have to research and know, like, the movies for the family is going to cost, you know, $20 or whatever the case may be, and write that on there. And so how much do we have to save? And so it was a matter of using cash to put money in there, and then knowing when the kids would know when that dollar amount, we reach 20, now we know that we can afford to, because we've taken care of our other responsibilities. And now we, you know, and the entertainment fund is where it needs to be to take care of whatever we were going to do. And then I was just going to add, before segueing to the investment part of the conversation, my parents started with my kids for birthday money, or anytime that they received dollars from my parents, that they would have them give usually 50% back, and it would go into their investment account or savings account that my parents, you know, had set up. And so what was nice about that, for a couple of reasons, the conversation around money was different and it was normalized. Two, they had a chance to figure out what they might have going on. And so if there was really a need or a want that, of course, my parents weren't going to take care of as grandparents and spoil or whatever, but they also had a chance to say, I'm wanting to get this, and they could put, you know, maybe a little bit extra into something saved into their savings for it. But they also realized that they're taking care of their future. And that was the nice part. They were invested in their future. The other part of this, and we kind of will segue into the investment, is this was nice because it helped me as a parent have the support of another group of people who were not in the house, who valued money, who valued having those conversations separate than my conversation with the kids. And so it kind of, when we're talking about stress earlier, that kind of removed some of that stress. I wasn't always the person having the conversation about, you know, money and saving. There was another person, a couple people who were having their own conversations, maybe on the phone. What do you have going on? You know, and so that really was great for our family dynamic and, you know, reducing some stress. But I also see those life lessons playing out with my kids now in their chase. Like, it definitely, now that it's their money and their responsibility, some of those conversations are coming back to me about, you know, their plans. And so that's good. That was the good part of that. So Catrice, you asked about getting the stocks. I'm going to pull this up right here. What are our thoughts about teaching kids about long-term savings and IRAs and stock market? And that's actually kind of what we're going to start segueing into, because I think what I first want to do is kind of get Antoinetta's thoughts on what are the different ways people can invest into their children's future. And so those are some of the things that you just mentioned, but I'm sure there might be some other things that Antoinetta can briefly mention. And one of those things that we will talk about is the 529, the many different ways that it can be used. It isn't just necessarily for college, it's higher education. And so if you could maybe answer Catrice's questions about teaching kids long-term savings and different investment options, Antoinetta.
Catrice, that is a great question. And I say it is very important to have those conversations, because let's face it, in most jobs that they go out and get today, most jobs nowadays don't even have pension plans. And so the only options that they have to save for their retirement is going to be through the 401ks and or their employer retirement plans. So it's, when they get there, it's teaching the kids that this is your number one driver to save for your retirement and to help you build that wealth. With that, also, I talked to kids earlier and really just getting them in the whole concept of paying themselves first. That's one of the biggest things that I tell everybody, that I say to everybody with everything. You worked hard, you've got to earn that money. The government took what they're going to take out in taxes. The first person after that that should get paid is you. And they say, what do you mean by that? Funding your 401k plans, funding your retirement plans, your savings plans, whatever. And then we start paying everybody else. Because I'm like, if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else unless home is taken care of first. That's my number one concept. So I always say teaching them that and having that. And the way we can do that with kids younger is, like we said, having those savings accounts plans. When we do give them money, I love the idea of how Tanya, your parents had your kids putting some away and different things and using those apps. Because I get my children, a lot of us go to church and we have our things where we give 10% back to the church. And I tell my kids, there's 3 buckets. You have your savings bucket, you have your charity bucket, and you have your spending bucket. So we want to make sure we're putting money into that. And so when I take my kids, when they get money, I have them break it into thirds. A third goes to your savings bucket, a third goes to your charity bucket, and a third that you can spend. And they get mad at me sometimes, but it works. And then I tell them that because when you go later and I say, what are you saving for? What do you want? What are we using this for? Because the biggest thing with investment is, like I said, it comes down to that mindset. And we have to put a reason of why behind what we're doing and understanding that. So giving those options, giving those things, it's helping kids participate into their savings for education, savings for their cars, savings to what have you, whatever it is. It's getting that buy-in from them. And so once they understand that and they get that, it's a good thing to talk to them about those different plans and options of how you do that to save. Because I think it helps the question become easier, and it breaks down those barriers of saying, oh, that's not an option for me. Because I get that a lot when I sit down and I talk to kids. Or matter of fact, I was talking to a young girl yesterday and we had this conversation. She's been working at her job for 5 years. And I was talking to her, I said, well, have you been investing in your 403B plan at your job? And she said, no, why would I do that? And I'm like, why wouldn't you do that? That's free money you're leaving on the table. And we had this whole conversation and she was just like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. I don't have the extra money to do that. And I'm like, it's important that you do that. And so it's just having that conversation of letting them know what it is and the different options and things. And so there is options of how we can do that. There is 529 plans to save for education. That is a great option. If you know your child is going to go to college, you want them to go to college. Because, hey, let's face it, when I went to college, my mom didn't make a lot of money. I was able to go on grants, scholarships, and different things like that. And as a result, I got a good job and make really good money now. My kid's not going to get that. So, and it's the realistic of it. And I'm sitting here like, okay, now I got to pay for education. And how is that going to do that? How do I do that? How do I fund that? How do I make that right? So 529s are good options to really start that savings for that. And it's something that not only can you contribute to yourself, but also grandparents, aunts, uncles, anybody. Everybody that asks me what my kids want, oh, they need money for their 529 plan. We trying to pay for such and such to go to college. We try to do this and do that. And my kids get upset at me, but I'm like, this is not free. And I had my son wants to go to University of Michigan. And I had him research the tuition of what it costs to go to University of Michigan as an in-state and out-of-state student. Mm-hmm. And he was like, it costs that much, Mom? Well, what I'm gonna do? I don't know. That's just one semester, baby. You gotta do this. I just had a daughter that just graduated from Alabama A&M University. And she had that whole wake up too. I was like, this costs. How we gotta figure out how to do this, how to do that. And so it was really having those conversations and understanding. And I was like, you gotta get a job. You gotta do this, you gotta do that. And so it's those different things that are out there for them that you can do. 529s is one of the good ways to start with that, because in most states, and it depends on where your state is, in most states you get a tax advantage from it contributing to those plans. And so that it helps. It's giving some money off, and you can use it for their college, for their tuition. If they have, now that they passed the law with everything that happened with COVID, and some of you may not know this, but if they do have them, if you have them already, you may be able to use them to pay off some student loan in the future as well. So, and a lot of people get this option. They say, what if I get this for my daughter and she decides not to go to college? Well, you as the parent own the account. And if your child decides not to go to college, you can always substitute that money to another child, to another relative, to what have you. Push come to shove, if you don't have anyone else, you can take it out, but there will be a tax penalty on it. But there is advantages and ways to do that. So it's just really sitting back and thinking, and you can even have them for yourself. You know, if you're an adult and saying you're going to go back to school and you know that you want to do that, you can have a 529 plan for yourself to fund that as well. And it's not just higher education anymore. It can be K through 12. So those parents that may want to send their kids to private school, there's options in that as well, that you can do the K through 12 education in there as well. And so there's a lot of changes and things that have gone into effect with these different plans that allows you to do different things. There's no income limit requirements. And that's one of the things that a lot of people that is very good to it. Where what I'm saying, there's no income limits. You as a parent can make as much money as you want to it, and there's no limit on how much you can contribute. Because like with IRAs and different things, there's a limit of income you start fading yourself out. But in 529 plans, there is no income limits. There's gifts, different things that you can do and can give, grandparents can give, different things like that. So it's a robust thing in conversation, but it's a good tool to use for education savings. And then education, that can be, because I got this one time, somebody said, well, what if they don't go to a university? If they go to cosmetology school, they go to school to become a mechanic, they go to, you know, there is different things that we can use to qualify for education assistantship. What if my child goes and they do get a scholarship? You can take the funds out as well with that caveat that the scholarship was awarded. So there is different options and things out there that can help with that.
That's actually just a segue. One of the things that we will do as a foundation that we will contribute to the 529s in the future, because we know that that will be something that we can help parents and kids, you know, be prepared for, instead of giving them a Starbucks or McDonald's card or something like that, where it's paying them, you know, but it's not necessarily doing anything for their future. And we do know that there is a level of immediate gratification that people want to experience, so we don't rule that out. But we also feel like it's a good steward of our resources to make sure that we are helping kids in the future and helping families stay invested for themselves. So, and I think when it comes to, I think Miss Helena said there are investment games and apps for children, and so we're talking about school, but is there anything, Antoinetta, that we could do just in general for preparing for the future? I mean, we've talked about the 529, but what about just in general investments for young people? I think to Catrice's point, just in general, how do we involve kids in that savings for the 401s? How do we start those conversations with them and talk to them so that they can be prepared? I think of, you know, college kids getting those first jobs. What are some key things that we can maybe say to them about why they should look at those 401s, and, you know, to that person who didn't necessarily look at the 403B, and what's the difference between a 403B and a 401?
Good question. The difference between a 401k and a 403B is basically it's what your employer has. Most hospitals are not, most corporations have 401ks. Most hospitals or government entity jobs may have the 403Bs. They're all the same plan. It's just how you code them. Some government jobs has TSP plans, but that is just how it goes with those. So those are just different names, but it's basically the employer retirement plan that's offered to them. Another good aspect that I would say that you can even start looking at before kids kind of start going is what's big now is the Roth accounts, Roth IRAs. And those are good options for individuals because what happens is they put in after-tax money. And when you retire, you can take that money out down later on down the line, and you've already paid taxes on it, and it's grown and it's tax-free income. That is a good tool that a lot of people like to use. And even in adults and especially younger kids in this generation, I talk to them a lot about doing that because you can contribute up to $6,000 a year for those. And I tell them, think about it. Even if you got babysitting job or you got something, caveat is you have to have some type of earned income. But what I have some parents do is they will say, hey, you contribute to your Roth, I will match you. As long as they have a W-2 or something showing that they made at least that $6,000, they can do that. But it's a caveat, anything you contribute into a Roth plan, if you need to use it for something later, before you retire, you can take out what you contribute with no tax consequences on there. The minimum, you have to have it in there for 5 years. If you have earnings that you made money off of it and you take that out, you will pay taxes on that. So let me break it down to you to kind of make it kind of clear. So if you have $5,000 in the account and you have the account for 2 years and you say, hey, I need to have $5,000 back, you can take your $5,000 out with no penalty because that's what you contributed. But say in that 2 years, it grew to 10,000 and you say, I need 10,000 of it out, you would pay the taxes on that extra 5,000 that has gained money. That's basically how that kind of works. And with that, so I just like to give that kind of caveat because it's a tricky thing, but it is also a great thing that you can do in this after tax expensive. So that is a good option because with 529s, because I'm reading this chat, yes, 529s can be used for educational expenses, computers, textbooks, supplies, tuition at the dorms, whatever they pretty much need to go to school, sometimes they can use that money for that bills. So long as it's school related, it can pretty much be used for that. So I've seen that question come up. I wanted to make sure that I did get a chance to answer that for them.
We have about 15 minutes left. I don't know if Cindy or Elena have any other questions they want to quickly ask.
I do. I want to shift just a little bit. You know, we've talked a lot about education related expenses and investing for the future. A question that I hear a lot that can be really tricky is paying down debt. You know, there are several schools of thought around paying down debt. And a lot of people will immediately go to, I should pay down my largest debt first. That's not always the best case scenario. So Antoinetta, what do you recommend to your clients when it comes to paying down debt?
When I'm dealing with that, I like to use what I call the snowball effect because it gives you that, because let's be honest, we like to see immediate gratification. So we're all like that. So what I tell everybody is take all of your debt, write it all down from the largest amount down to the smallest. And you write your minimum payments that are due on each of those. So the snowball effect, what you do is you take your smallest debt and you pay money to pay that off. Anything extra that you get, you pay that minimum plus extra to pay that off. But meanwhile, with your other debts, you're still paying the minimum payment of what's required. Once that smallest debt is paid off, you say, okay, So if my smallest debt was $800 and I was paying $100 a month, now my next debt is $2,000 and that minimum payment is $100. Now I'm taking that $100 that I was paying from that $800 debt and adding it to that $100 minimum payment that I was paying before. So now I got $200 going towards that $2,000 debt. And as you go, you keep building up and adding those minimum payments to the next minimum payment, and it cuts the time down. And what it does is it gives you that, because you start seeing it, it's about building momentum with it. And then that mindset. So you say, okay, I got that down. Yay, that was good. Now I can start with this one and this one. And you just keep building that way. And I think that's the best way to kind of do it, because then you're seeing your extra work, you're seeing all of that. And also what it's doing is it's training you. Because what happens is as you go and start doing this, you already have that money accounted for. You were already paying your bills out as it was. Your debt is gone. As you get ready to clear out that debt, you're already changed and done. So now when your debt is cleared, you have this lump sum of money that you have been putting away. And I tell people, okay, now that's your income. So now you're already used to paying that, doing that. Now let's take that and look at how can we invest? Because that's a lot of times people say, I don't have things to invest or I don't have stuff to do. And I say, yes, you do. You just got to be disciplined. And it's all about a discipline and mindset game. So I would start with the snowball effect and doing that. And the person that I like that describes it the most is Dave Ramsey has a very good plan of doing that. I love him in that aspect. There's some things that I don't agree with him 100% on, but in that aspect of paying down debt, he does a really good job of teaching how the snowball effect works.
Can I ask an unscripted follow-up question?
Yes.
Because this was something it was a mistake I made in my younger years. If you have debt, should you still be putting aside an investment for the future? Or should you take what you would invest and focus on paying down the debt first?
I get this a lot, and I always tell people, the earlier you can start investing, the more time you have to save and accumulate money. Because it's harder to do it in the later years of life. If we start, you hit 40 and then you're going to retire at 65, you know, it's a little harder to make up that money. So I always say that goes back to the pay yourself first concept. Your investments and savings should be treated as a bill as if you would pay the rest of your stuff. So paying those things first and then working through your debt to pay off those. I strongly suggest that, because the one thing that you can't get back time. And that's one thing that your money grows and investments grow through time. And that's how it accumulates with compounding interest and all of that. And that's what I tell people, it's the timing that you can't get back. So working on that debt at the same time, it's now, hey, you may not be able to put as much away as you could while you're going through that, but once the funds are available, you'll have more. So it's like putting something away for your retirement, because like we said, I tell people this all the time, and this is my line, and Tanya cracks up when I say this all the time. I say, you can borrow for everything in life except for your retirement. The day that you retire and you walk out your job, you cannot go up to your bank and say, hey, I retired today, can you give me $1 million? They're gonna look at you and say no. But if you want to buy a house, you can borrow for that. If you want to get education, you can borrow for that. You can borrow, you know what I'm saying? And that is the one thing that I tell people. You cannot borrow for your retirement. So you are your best investment. Take the time to put the money into you and find a way to simultaneously pay it off at the same time.
Jackie, I have a question kind of along those lines. Are there activities that we could do with kids to kind of get them in this mindset of learning how to invest and also plan for your future? Are there activities or websites that you're familiar with that we can maybe send to people in the future that you use in class or anything like that?
Yeah, I use like placement.org. I use that one where it gives them an opportunity to do a job. And then actually they have 30 days with, I think, $1,000, and they have to make kind of decisions. That's placement.org. That's one. Also Payback Challenge, that has a little to do with like college, and kind of gives them a way of figuring out like tuition and things to do in college. It gives them points. So that's something that's really, really important to do too. I usually do the H&R Block budget challenge with my students. That is something where, you know, they actually have a car payment, they have rent, life insurance, I mean, all kind of things that they have to do. And it's just like a simulation, and that's scholarship money. So I'll share some of those resources. I do a lot of things with my students. As parents, there's so many things, you know, the internet is a really good resource to kind of just, you know, play around. And I always do all the things myself, play all the games and do some things. So that way I know that whether it's appropriate for my students or not, or even, you know, my daughter's 28 now, but she's a third grade teacher. She's in her 7th year of teaching. And so when we think about applying all those things that Antoinetta spoke about, a Roth IRA, you know, I started as soon as my daughter got her first teaching job. I said, you know what, put $150 to a Roth right away, you know, have it already come out of your paycheck, you don't see it. The 401k, she has a hybrid plan through the government at 401k. I'm on the legacy, which I have a 403b and a 457. I have some things of that nature. She doesn't see that money. So when you let your kids know with their first jobs, automatically start earmarking, paying yourself first. If you never really see it, you don't realize, you know, you don't have, it's not in your budget. So you're not really missing it. And just being able to show her those different things, she's like, what? I have what? You know, yeah. You know, you think about 5 or 6 years of saving something and you don't really know that it's there later on in life. So those are some things, good things to talk about. Thank you for sharing all those, Antoinetta. I think those are some good resources for everybody to kind of think about. And I think we're going to be able to share all those things with you all in the future.
Absolutely. Any other last questions that anybody has? I think, Antoinetta, you answered Miss Selena's question for us around life insurance, I think, in the chat.
Yeah, and what I'll say on that is life insurance is very important for that, because life insurance does 2 different things. It provides a death benefit if someone does pass away unexpectedly, and also it is the beginning for a lot of people of wealth. And so I tell people the biggest thing is that is a lot of beginning of wealth, because it's income replacement. If we need to replace income if someone passes unexpectedly. And I have a lot of young people that have told me, oh, I don't need insurance. I can tell you how many clientele that I had during this COVID period that passed away in their 30s and 40s due to the COVID, and they were not prepared. And so I always tell people the biggest thing that you can do is prepare for the unexpected. It's one of those, like our car insurance, it's one of those things that you have just in case you're preparing for that accident that does happen. So it's very important to have that in the financial plan, just so that you can make sure that that goes back to that understanding why you're doing that, why you're investing, why you're doing that, or why you're saving. What is it for? What do you want to provide your kids with? And for me, it's very important because I have a child that has sickle cell, and I'm like, okay, I got to make sure that he is taken care of, because that's one thing that he cannot get is life insurance. And so it's like, how do I prepare for him in his future to make sure that he's taken care of if something happens to us? And so that was a big conversation that we had to have with my husband and with everybody. We had tough conversations. And with my other children that can get insurance, they were a little upset, but you know, of how we did things. But it is very important to have that in your plan, to just be protected, to make sure that you're taking care of. The average burial today is about $15,000, $20,000.
Yeah, I just want to say that Cindy and I actually had this conversation for another group, Unique Family Connections, around insurance in general, car insurance, life insurance, health insurance, because we don't talk about that. And that has a big impact financially on on life. And so we wanted to make sure that we have that conversation. So I want to give everybody an opportunity, Jackie and Antoinetta, to wrap up a few things. If anybody has any questions, please put it in the chat. I'll make sure that we answer it and get it out there. But I will tell you that we will be having these monthly conversations around how money moves in the community and with the community, because it's extremely important. Catrice, thank you for your question around investments, because it goes hand in hand when we're thinking about planning for the future. We will have some segments specifically around, investment and things, so people can get a chance to ask specific questions around, again, investing. We'll talk more about college. I think a friend of mine, Nikki Lambert Buffkin, is on the call, and so we've talked about college kids getting actually ready and hearing this information for themselves. It's one thing as a parent to say, it's another thing for them to have that firsthand information in their hands so that they can start making those decisions. Because face it, we don't always have all the answers that they want to hear. So if we can put it in their hands, they can, hear it. But also kids who are getting ready to go to college, 16, 17, 18, and looking at what life is going to look like. We want to have those conversations with youth. So this is a monthly conversation. It is a part of our platform for the Carter Education and Community Foundation. We want to address the wealth achievement gap, and the only way we can do that is being upfront and unapologetic and probably pretty assertive for most people, but having these conversations is extremely important. So any last takeaways, Jackie or Antoinetta, that you'd like to share with us?
I just wanted to say, I know that we didn't talk a lot about emergency funds, but I just wanted to say that, just try to at least do $1,000 emergency fund. Because, when we start thinking about people living paycheck to paycheck, 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So we could be in that group. Okay. So thinking about an emergency fund, $1,000 right away. And even for kids that are having their first job, I say $300 for them, especially if they're driving. That could be a tire or, something, an issue with the car. So those are some of the things I think we need to talk about later on. Just credit scores, secured credit cards. I know you talked a little bit about the IRAs, the custodial IRAs. Some of those are some of the things we need to discuss with parents. I'm excited about this first meeting, and it was so great to see everybody, and just hope to share more things with you next month.
Thanks, Jackie. Good point. Yes, we will. Antoinetta?
Thank you. I totally agree with Jackie that having those emergency funds and stuff is great. The biggest thing that I want you to take away from today is you are important, you matter, and you determine your future. If you started out bad yesterday, you can make a change. You're the only person that's in control of your financial future and what that looks like from now. So the biggest thing that I want you to do is just take that and say, how can I think tomorrow? How can I be better tomorrow than I was today? And every day, if we just work to get 1% better at that, we'll do that. So make a goal. If it's just saying, hey, I'm going to track what I spent today, let's track that. If I'm going to this month, I'm going to focus on putting any extra that I have into that savings account, let's do that. Give yourself a financial goal and get an accountability partner that will help you make sure that you're on track and achieving that, so that you can start seeing that progress. Because like I said, it's momentum and mindset. Once your momentum and your mindset changes, you will totally change your financial trajectory. So that's the biggest thing that I can tell you. Invest in yourself first and make sure you make you a priority.
Yay.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate everyone being on the call who jumped on. This will be on our social platforms. Also, make sure that we'll send you a survey, so fill it out so that we can know what we can do better, and then also how we can plan for the future. So thank you and have a wonderful day.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.